guys, welcome back again to another video. Today we have an exciting project. I have a customer who has sent me, yes, more Oilers jerseys, but we are going to be making a long puffer today. That is why we need the two jerseys. We're gonna have this one on the top and then this blank one to fill in the bottom of the jacket. You'll see what I mean later. And one thing I'll note if you're going to be doing this project is these jerseys are a little different. You can kind of tell in the color. She had sent me these two different jerseys which ended up having different materials, so the color is slightly different, which I'm hoping we're not going to be able to tell too much, but something to look out for when you're buying a jersey for this project is to make sure that they are in fact the same material. So ordering from the same company, for example, can probably increase your chances of having the same material for your jersey. And I've gone ahead and printed my pattern. I printed it at the store, and for me in Canada, it's in Quebec, it's Bureau Gros, and in the rest of Canada, it'll be Staples, and then in the States, might be UPS or just a local print store near you, for example. So basically, I'm gonna lay this flat and then start cutting out my pieces. When I got this printed at the print store, what I asked for was them to print 100% scale on engineering paper, and basically afterwards you're going to see these little 1-inch and 2-inch squares at the top of your page, and always make sure to measure that before actually continuing or starting your project, because that's going to tell you if it was printed correctly. So 100% scale is the most important thing to note. I printed the single sheet format in my local print store, but there are other printing options. You can print at your at-home printer or at your library or however you choose. So yeah, that's just what I recommend, is the single sheet, so you don't have to take the time to put the puzzle pieces together. So I'm gonna get started cutting these pieces out. Okay, so these are the 1-inch and 2-inch squares that you'll need to measure to make sure that your print is correct and that it in fact printed at 100% scale. So that looks perfect to me, and we can go ahead and head over to our sizing chart. Okay, so this is our sizing chart. We have all of these sizes available, and we can access each of these sizes by following the dotted lines that align to the size that you desire. So today I'm going to be making a medium. So we have that classic long dashed line, and so I'm going to look for that on my pattern. And if I take a look at my lines, I can see that the long dash aligns with this line right here, so I'm going to cut along there for all of the patterns, and we should be good to go. So something else I wanted to touch on is our little guides on each of the pattern pieces. We can tell exactly how many pieces to cut out of what type of fabric by looking at our little guide here. So for example, on this sleeve, you would cut out 2 jersey pieces, 2 lining, and 2 batting for the outer sleeve, and then for the lining you would cut 2 of the lining pieces. So 4 lining total, 2 batting, and 2 jersey for the sleeve. So we need quite a few layers for this jacket. but you'll see why as we go along. And for the pockets, for example, we'll need a lot less. So here we would only need 4 of the lining. And I'll take you along how to assemble everything as we go. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut out all of my pattern pieces and making sure everything is in the right size. So I'm going to be following that medium long dotted line, and you can do the same with whatever size that you choose. And I'll meet you back here after we finish cutting out the pattern pieces. Okay, so now that we've cut out all of our pieces, I'm going to put these to the side for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the side seams of the jersey to start. We're going to think about which jersey we want to go on the top. So I have the McDavid on the back of this one, so I want this one to be on the top. So essentially what you're going to want to do is take some little clippy scissors, or you can take a seam ripper and start to open up your seams. If you have a super large jersey, you can just cut. If you have a lot of extra material to work with, but otherwise, if your jersey is a little bit smaller, then you'll want to maximize the material as much as possible and really make sure to just seam rip as opposed to cutting the fabric directly. So that's what I'm doing, is I'm going to cut the seam open right now. And one thing I wanted to mention when selecting your jersey is you want to always make sure it is at least 2 sizes larger than the end jacket size that you want to make. So make sure to take a look at your jersey sizes, and you're going to want to give yourself a lot of extra room. For example, I'm making a medium, so I had requested my customer to send me a minimum of an XL jersey or larger. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the rest of these seams, and I will meet you back here. Okay, so I'm in a new location. Don't worry about that. But basically what I've gone ahead and done is opened up the jersey. We can see our sleeves laying flat. We can see our front and our back laying flat. And next what we're going to do is we're going to open up the collar. So I've already given it a little head start here, but we're going to take our seam ripper and we're basically just going to open it up all the way along this edge here, removing this part of it, because if you can see, it is a different material, so we want it to be a consistent material for the jacket. That's just my preference. I think it's going to create a much nicer result. So I'm going to go ahead and finish seam ripping, removing this top collar, and I'll meet you back here in just a sec. Okay, so now that I have removed the collar from the top of the jersey, it's all open now, which is great. Now we can start to lay our pattern down and get an idea of exactly where we want it to sit. So this is going to determine a lot on how our jersey jacket is going to end up looking, how much of the orange we're going to have on the shoulder, how many of the stripes we're going to have at the bottom, things like that. So we're going to want to make sure to do this part quite precisely. So what we're gonna do is we're going to stretch out our material nice and flat. And we're gonna take one of the front sides of the pattern piece, lay it flat, and try to get it in the middle of the jersey. So in the case of the Oilers jersey, it's gonna be lined up right in the middle of that drip here. I'm gonna wanna get this as high as possible, but not too high to the point where it's sliding past the jersey. So just to the edge there is great. Making sure we're both in the middle of the logo and high enough to maximize. Okay, like so. And it's okay if we go a little bit into the sleeve area, as we might need some of that fabric. So I think it's gonna go approximately there. Something like that should be good. And I will pin it down. And while I'm at it, I'm going to take my other pattern piece. Line it up, making sure that it is even on both sides. So when you're happy with the placement, you can pin it down all the way around on the edges and get that nice and secure before we cut it out. Make sure to pull your jersey from underneath to ensure it is as flat as possible. Okay, so I'm gonna go pin this down and I will meet you back here to cut it out. Okay, so a really important tool that we're gonna need for this project is a soldering iron, and this is going to help the edges stop fraying when we cut down the logo. So I'm gonna plug this in right before I cut out my jersey, especially right after I cut down the middle of the logo. So I'm gonna plug this in now. Make sure to place this on something safe, like something metal. I have this cheese grater. This gets extremely hot, so make sure not to touch or put any plastic or anything near that. Okay, so I've pinned down my two front pieces. It's okay if you have some overhang here. We're gonna use the other jersey for that part. But I'm just gonna go ahead and start cutting it out. And once I do that, I'm gonna take my time to cut down the middle as well. Okay, now we're gonna cut down the center, and as soon as I'm finished cutting, I'm gonna run right over to the soldering iron and clean up that edge. So what you're gonna wanna do here is make sure to just gently tap. Don't hold it in one spot for too long or you will burn it. Okay, so I was just about to cut out the back piece, but I realized we have this fighting strap in still. So I'm gonna go ahead and seam rip that out. And then we can cut out the back. So just use your seam ripper and then you can just have at it at all that thread there. Okay, so now we're gonna cut out our back piece. So what I've done is I've taken these front pieces and I've placed them over top exactly in line with this top line right here. I wanted to see how much orange was on the front so that I could match it to the back and have it as sort of seamless as possible from the front to the back. So that is what I have done here. Just wanted to line it up nicely. All right, and now we're gonna take our pattern piece, our back pattern piece, and we're gonna place it approximately where we've placed these front pieces, so right at that edge there. Okay, so when you've got it in a good spot, you can actually just remove these front pieces and then pin in place. Make sure your jersey is nice and flat and centered. Then I'm gonna go and pin all the way around. Okay, so now that I've pinned it all down, we can go ahead and cut it out. So next what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our second jersey. This one doesn't have the name on the back, and we're going to open up the seams from the side seam all the way to the arms. I'm gonna open that all the way up. If you have a larger jersey, so a much larger jersey than the size that you wanna make, and you laid it out flat on the pattern, feel like you have enough material to work with, you can simply just cut along this seam here. But because my jersey I think is just enough material, I'm going to seam rip it so that I can maximize the amount of fabric that I have to work with. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this, and I'll meet you back here for the next step. Okay, so we have opened up our second jersey on the side seams, which is great. Now on the back of the jersey, we are going to open up this bottom part, just so we have a little bit of that extra material that we can work with for the bottom of the jacket. So I'm just going to seam rip this open, go all the way along, and then just open this up here. So I'm gonna go do that, and I'll join you back here in just a second. Okay, so next what we're gonna do is we're gonna lay our back piece flat, the one that we want to use for the back of the jacket. And I'm actually gonna go ahead and cut off the stripes off the bottom of the jersey. As if you can see that, as I want to have a continuous look and have the stripes at the bottom. So I'm going to cut off these stripes and then use the stripes from the other jersey. So I'll show you what I mean in just a sec. So we can cut right at the top of the top stripe. Okay, that's off. Now what we can do is lay the back of our other jersey on top and just take a look at our pattern and see how much material that we need. So we're going to want to make sure that there is a bit of room for seam allowance. So about 3/8 is usually good. If you can do 1/2 inch if you want to be safe. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut up this side seam of the sleeve. So we can cut up the sleeve here. Okay, then cut across. You can cut about 1/2 inch under the top of the jersey. You can give yourself a lot of extra room. You're not going to need all of this, but we can just be extra safe. Okay, now we have a back panel that we can use. So now I've laid this back on my pattern, and I have my back panel that I've just cut here, and I'm just going to see where I would want to attach those. Okay, I think it's going to be approximately the end of this one is here, so I want it to be about 1/2 inch overlap there. So I think I'm going to cut it again right at the armpit there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip them over. And I'm going to pin them together. Okay, so now that this is all pinned down, I'm going to put this to the side for now, but we can start to see how that's going to look. Coming together nicely. Put that to the side for now so we can sew that later. And now what we're going to do is we're going to cut out our sleeve pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up the bottom of the sleeve. So just to, again, maximize our fabric. So I'm going to go in with my little seam ripper again and open that up. And I'm going to do this for both of the sleeves. Okay, so the next step is we are going to cut out our sleeves. And so basically I'm placing my sleeve pattern on top of one of my sleeves, and we're going to line it up directly in the center. And what we're going to do is pin that down and cut out the remaining scrap material. And don't fret if there's a little bit of extra overhang here on the bottom. Some of these smaller jerseys might not give you a ton of room near the cuffs, but that is okay. Once you cut out your first pattern piece, just cutting out the remaining scraps, once you've centered it, that is going to be your new pattern piece for the sleeve. So that is one workaround if you have a jersey that is not the largest and you want to really maximize the what you're working with, the fabric. That is one workaround there. But if you have a really large jersey, then this should fit fine. So just something to note. So I'm gonna get going on pinning this down and cutting all around, and then I will use that as my pattern piece for the other sleeve. Okay, so as I mentioned, this newly cut out piece is now going to be your pattern piece. So we're going to lay these on top. Exactly. So we're going to line up the numbers, line up the stripes as we want them to match exactly. Perfect. Now that that's lined up, I'm going to pin it down and then cut it out. Perfect. And I think I'm going to do more of the double stripe look. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to basically have like the two series of stripes in the front and just the one in the back. And I think that will look cool. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to remove the seam off the bottom to give that a little more room, and I'm going to do the same for the other bottom front of the jersey so that I can attach them at this point. So as you can see, I have lined up my extra jersey on top of the second one. So everything laid out here, I want to make sure that these stripes are in the same place as the back. So I'm lining those up. I have my front pieces here. and I see this goes to about here. So I'm going to give it some extra room, and I'm gonna cut just straight across right here. Perfect. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip everything over. So I'm gonna flip this over. Again, lining those up. Flip this over. Lining everything up. And when it's finally in a spot that you are happy with, you can see these line up, we can pin. Okay, I've pinned this down. Now what I'm gonna do is actually cut this directly down the center here. Okay. Now we can start to see how our front pieces are gonna look. Awesome. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to sew these together. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna sew the back pieces together. So I've gone ahead and just flattened these and then trimmed this line to make it nice and aligned. And then we're just gonna sew along this edge 3/8 of an inch. See it coming together now, so we can put this one aside, and then we're gonna do the same thing with the two front pieces. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're going to lay our patterns flat on these pieces that now have the extra fabric attached at the bottom. And we're simply going to just cut the excess fabric. So I'm just going to cut along the edge there and make those nice rounded corners. However, if you want to have a straight edge at the bottom of your jacket, you can simply just cut a straight edge and just have that. But I'm gonna try to do the curved edge look here. So I'm going to cut out the excess fabric now. Okay, now that we've cut the one side, I'm gonna lay the other one right on top. So that we can make sure they are symmetrical. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut that excess fabric to make sure they are the exact same shape. Okay, great. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to lay these on top of my back piece so that the back shape is aligned as well. Perfect. Now I'm going to cut the excess from the bottom piece. Okay, perfect. Now I'm happy to say that we are finally done cutting the main jersey pieces, and we can fold those and set them to the side. However, we still have a few pieces to cut with the remaining fabric. And those pieces are the outside welt pocket. So we're going to need 2 of the jersey for that. And then for the collar, we're going to need 1. So I'm gonna grab my extra fabric, see what I have to work with, and then decide what scraps I want to use for what. Okay, so I have chosen my pieces that I'm going to use. So I'm going to use this leftover scrap for my collar, and I'm going to use this leftover scrap for my outside welt pocket. I'm going to just simply pin this down and cut it out. So I'm only going to need 2 of these. I will just pin these down and cut them out. And then I'm going to do the same with this piece, which is the collar. So I want to include some of this white stripe on there, so I'm just going to lay that down, and then I'll pin that down here and then cut it out. So I'm going to cut out 2 of these and 1 of these, and I will be right back. Perfect. We have these pieces complete. Now we're officially done cutting out our jersey pieces, and we can move on to cutting out the lining and the batting pieces. Okay, so next what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut out my inner pocket piece and my outside welt lining pieces. So I'm gonna need 4 of each. So I have all this scrap fabric from previous projects that I've pulled, as I want to be as sustainable as possible. So we're going to try to use as much of this fabric as we can. I think we have plenty for 4 of each of these pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and pin these down and cut them out, and then we can move on to our batting pieces. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is just, while I'm at it with these pieces, I'm gonna cut out the batting for them. So I'm gonna need 4 pieces of this batting. I have, again, some scraps from previous projects. I'm gonna use a little bit of a thinner batting for these welts, because we don't need it to be super fluffy in that area. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pin it down. You don't need to pin it excessively on this fabric because it sort of just clings to it. I'm just gonna do some light pinning here and then cut it out. Okay, that's 1. I'm gonna do 3 more, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so what we're gonna do next is form these little packages, as I like to call them. So we're gonna put our batting on the bottom, followed by, and then check the sides, making sure it's the good side up, followed by our lining layer. So we're gonna do one like that, and another one just like it. I'm gonna put 1 pin in it just to keep them together for now. 1 pin in this one. Then we're gonna do another one, batting, followed by lining, followed by jersey, just like so, and then pin in it to keep them together. Then we're going to do the same thing as the previous. Batting, lining, and jersey. Perfect. Now we have our little packages for the welts, and I'm going to put this as well as the pocket pieces to the side for now, and we can move on to cutting out the lining and the batting for the collar. So next we're going to cut out, this is the lining material that I'm going to use for the inside of the jacket. So I'm going to cut one of these for the collar. Okay, now what I'm doing is I'm cutting out the lining pieces for the collar. So I need 2 of these for the collar. I've been using this piece as my guide. So I've done 1 already. Now I need to do 1 more. Okay, so now I'm gonna need 2 pieces of the batting for the collar. So I'm gonna cut those out now. Okay, so what we're gonna do is form our little packages again. I have my batting, my lining, and I'm gonna top that with my jersey piece. Great, now we're gonna set that to the side. And we have our lining and our batting for the collar. Just going to pin that and set it to the side. Now I'm going to cut out the rest of the pieces for the sleeves. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is cut out the rest of the lining pieces that I need. So I'm going to start with this back panel, and I'm going to line this up. Okay, now that this is nice and flat, I'm going to pin it down. Perfect, we're gonna need another one of these. So I'm gonna scooch this down. Okay, so now I have my 2 front pieces, and I'm gonna cut out 2 lining pieces for each side. Okay, so now that we've cut out all of our front and back pieces for the lining, I'm going to cut out the sleeve pieces for of the lining material, and we're gonna need 4 of this type of material. Okay, so next what we're gonna do is cut out our remaining batting pieces. I need to do 2 of the back pieces and 2 of each of the front pieces, and then 2 for the arm pieces. And we should be good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut these out, and then we can assemble our little packages and then start sewing. Okay, and now I'm going to attach our little packages together. We have our welt and we have our collar. Okay, so I have attached our little packages together. We have the collar pieces. You can see they're all sewn down. We have our welts, also all sewn down. So this is great. And now I'm gonna move to assembling the packages for the front and the back of the jacket. Okay, so here I am assembling my little packages together. So I have my lining pieces with the batting. So this is for one front side, the other front side. So you have the lining and the batting. And then I have my outer jacket layers. So I have the jersey, the lining, and the batting. Then the other side, same thing, jersey, lining, batting. Then I have my sleeves. I've got 2 of these that are just loose for the sleeve lining. Then I have my jersey, lining, and batting for the sleeve, and then jersey, lining, batting for the other sleeve. And then for the back pieces, I have batting and lining, and then batting, lining, and jersey for the outer layer of the back piece. Perfect. Now basically what I'm going to do is both attach them together and then do my quilting lines. So I'm gonna start here with my lining pieces. So that is these ones. So I'm gonna do what I did for my welts and collar is I'm simply going to attach them along the edge. So just connecting them together. So I'm just going to pin these in place and then take it over to the sewing machine. So I'm going to do that with the 2 front pieces and then also the back lining piece as well. Okay, so I have finished attaching my pieces together for the lining. This is the back piece. It's all sewn down on the sides, which is great. Now what I'm gonna do is attach my little label, intro to sole, of course. And I'm gonna change my thread to black and attach it on this back panel of the lining. And that's how it looks on. Okay, so now I'm gonna do the quilting lines on all of my outer pieces. So my 2 sleeves, 2 front pieces, and then 1 back piece. Here I have just some painter's tape, but you can use seamstress tape or masking tape, but it's better if it's like a little thinner, in my opinion. But basically what I like to do is just take my ruler, and I like to do lines that are about 4 inches apart. So what I'll do is I'll just measure 4 inches apart and then simply place my tape, and this will be my guide for where I'm going to sew. Making sure it's even on both sides. And then what I'm gonna do here is I'm actually going to avoid the numbers. So I'm gonna sew along this line, stop, and then along this line, stop, along this line, stop, so on, just avoiding the numbers just because I find it's a much cleaner look. However, you can pass through the number if you don't mind that look yourself. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish out these guidelines with my tape here. And then I'm going to hit up the sewing machine and then sew these quilting lines down. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm basically just taking this fill and I am breaking it up a little bit and simply stuffing in between these quilting lines. So I'm going between the last two layers, so the batting and the lining, and I'm just going to spread a little thin layer of fluff just to define our quilting lines and add a little puff. So you can really do it as puffy as you want. Or if you want a thinner jacket, you can just skip this step altogether. But I want to try to give my customer a little bit of that puffier look. Basically, you can just spread it out by patting it down and removing a bit if it's too much. And we'll just continue that for the rest of the pieces. So for the other sleeve, for the two front pieces, and for the back pieces. And then after that, we will attach the sides. We will make the sides closed by adding a stitch all the way around. And yeah, then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is I'm going to seal up the edges by sewing all the way around all of the pieces right on the edge, just to close everything up, and then we'll be good to move on to pockets. Okay, now that we have our pieces all stitched together, I'm now going to do our pockets. So we have our 4 welt pieces, so I'm going to take the piece with my lining and the batting with the jersey, and I'm going to fold them right sides facing, like so, for both of them. And I'm basically going to start by sewing 3 sides, leaving one side open, one long side open. So I'm going to do that now. So we can go ahead and cut those corners off. Flip it inside out. Then we can iron this flat and then sew this last side. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the welts onto the jacket front, and I'm going to decide where exactly I want them to go. If you take a look at the pattern, there is a guide for sort of a suggested placement for the welts, but you can really put them wherever is convenient. With a lot of these jerseys are very different, so sometimes you have to sort of shift things around depending on your jersey layout. So one thing to make sure is just making sure that they are the same on both sides. So once I figure out one placement, I'll just mirror it on the other side. So what you're going to want to do is, once you find a placement that you're happy with, you will face it jersey side down and then pin it in place. And then just flip it over like this, just to make sure it's going the right way. And everything looks good. Looks pretty good to me. So I'm simply going to mirror it on the other side. That looks about right, but I'm also going to take my ruler and measure to make sure it is in the exact same spot. So I like to measure from edge to edge. So this is 7 inches. 7 inches. And then from here to here, 5.5. 5.5. So that is looking pretty good to me. Here to here is 7. It's also 7. So this we know it's in the exact same placement. So I'm just going to pin that in place. Okay, it's looking good. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sew these down. So right along that line, we're just gonna sew this directly on the front there, right along here. Okay, so next what we're gonna do is we're going to take our 2 pocket pieces now, and we are going to attach these to very close to our welt. So we're gonna take our first piece, and again, make sure this big blob is facing downward. So you're gonna wanna make sure the majority of it is downward, because that's kind of where your hand goes in. So we're gonna place that down right in the middle of your welt here. And we're gonna have it be about 1/2 inch over this edge. So I'm gonna place that down like so. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna pin this in place. And then I'm going to sew right along that edge that we can feel underneath with our fingers. So just a couple centimeters away, making sure to leave a nice lip. Okay, so now we're going to actually take our second pocket piece. We're gonna place it on top and then flip it over. And then what we're gonna do is we're going to align them. You can just sort of pinch them together here, those edges of the pocket, making sure they're perfectly aligned. You can take a pin and pin them together. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we're actually going to sew a line right there. It should be about 1/2 inch from our seam that we just sewed. So sew that down right there, and then we can cut the pocket. So next what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna take my rotary cutter, placing it on a cutting board here. You can put it on a cutting board or cutting mat. And we can see we have a nice little crevice in the middle. And I'm just gonna split those open. Pull those open, and then I'm going to actually cut in the center. Make sure not to pass the end of your welt here. Now we can see there's a hole, and we can actually pass these through. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring them together, and we can clip or pin these down. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna just sew along that edge, securing the pocket together. Okay, so now the last step for the pocket is simply to press this down, and then we're gonna sew here and here. Okay, so I just pressed it down. Now I'm going to sew. Boom. That is one pocket done. Now we can do the other one. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm going to attach the shoulders of the lining. I have my two front pieces of the lining along with the back, and I'm just going to attach them right at the shoulder. You can either use clips or pins, and very straightforward, just line them up, pin, and then sew. Right along that edge and then right along this edge. Okay, now I'm going to attach the collar. So basically just going to place it corner to corner with the front of the jacket here. And then I'm going to pin and work my way all the way around to the other side. So now what we're going to do is we're going to attach our sleeve pieces. So we have our sleeve pieces for our lining, and we are essentially going to take the bigger side here and attach it to the armhole opening. And I'm simply going to attach starting at the corner, and then I'm going to pin all the way around. Okay, so it should look like this, and then we can basically just sew along that edge. Okay, so now that we have one sleeve attached, I'm going to do the same to the other side. Okay, so now I'm going to attach the sides, so both arms are on, and they should be kind of loose like that. And what we're gonna do is bring those arms together, bring the armpits together, and then bring the sides together. We're gonna pin or clip these down, and then we're gonna sew a straight line from the side all the way to the wrist. So that's what I'm gonna do now. Okay, so next what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our three pieces, so our back piece and our front pieces, line them up, right sides facing. So. And we're going to clip or pin the shoulders together. Okay, now that the shoulders are all clipped down, I'm going to sew along these edges. You can do 3/8 of an inch and then pass by twice to make sure it's super secure. Okay, so I have officially closed the shoulders. They should look like this. And now I'm going to go and attach the sleeves. Okay, so next what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna attach the sleeves. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna place it right sides facing against our jacket pieces. And we have our sleeve opening here. So you can see the two sides for the sleeve opening. And basically we're gonna attach corner to corner Boom. Clip that down. And we're gonna go all the way around, clipping to the other side. So just going to work your way around, clipping that down in the sleeve opening. All clipped down. You can go ahead and sew along that edge. Okay, so now that this sleeve is fully attached, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. Okay, so next what I'm gonna do is I'm going to attach the collar piece, and you can do this before you attach the sleeves if you like, but you definitely wanna have your front pieces and your back pieces on first. So what I'm gonna do is simply start at the front of the jacket, right sides facing, clip, and then work my way all the way around. So keep clipping, going around that edge until we reach the other side of the front. So I can even go ahead and clip that in place now if I want. And we're just going to clip that down. And once it's all clipped down, we can go ahead and sew along that edge, passing by twice to make sure it's as sturdy as possible. All right, I have that all clipped down, and now I'm going to sew along the edge. All right, we have the collar on. It's looking good. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and close up the sides. So we have our jacket laying flat open. We can take our front piece, align it with the back, take our other front piece and align it right sides facing like that. And then we can take our sleeves, fold them in half. And then what we're gonna do is basically close up the sides here. So the next step is we're going to clip these in place. And what we're gonna wanna make sure is to line up any stripes that we have as close as possible, as we want them to continue from the front to the back. So I'm gonna go ahead and clip this down right now, and then I will sew that edge down. Okay, so the next step that we're gonna do is we're going to attach our collars together of our lining jacket and our outer jacket. We're gonna put them right sides facing, and we are going to clip them together at the top from edge to edge like this, making sure they are even. We're gonna clip all the way across, and then we're basically just gonna sew a straight line across. Okay, now that that is all clipped down, I'm gonna sew straight line. Okay, the colors have been attached. As you can see, should look like that. So next what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the bottom of our jacket, again, flipping so it's right sides facing, and we're basically gonna attach corner to corner and clip all the way from one side of the bottom of the jacket to the other, and then we're gonna sew a nice long seam right along that edge. So I'm gonna go ahead and start clipping this down, and then I will hit up the sewing machine to sew that in place. Looks good. I'm gonna pass by a second time just to secure it. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm going to put our zipper on, and I'm going to place it right side down onto my jacket here. So we're gonna align it with the top, like so. And then I'm basically just going to clip it all the way down, working my way, making sure that we're not actually clipping our lining layer, just the outside layer. So we'll just clip that down. And then what we're gonna do is we're going to sew the outside down. Okay, so I've clipped down the zipper, which is great. I have also attached my zipper foot, as we can see, like this. Now is the time to attach that to your machine. So now we're just going to sew that down. So I'm going to sew right along this edge. And the zipper foot is gonna help me get as close as possible. Okay, so next what we're gonna do is we're going to take our clips and we are going to line it up, the zipper, with the other side. If you want here, you can use a little bit of seamstress chalk or maybe like a pin to determine your exact spot, but sometimes I just like to fold it under. So you're gonna take that zipper, fold it under like this, matching up my lines on either side of the jersey. Boom. Like so. I'm clipping the zipper ribbon with the other side, lining it up so that I have these two sides lined up perfectly. And I'm gonna do this until I reach the top. Okay, so now that I've got a few clipped down underneath, I'm gonna actually unzip. Like so. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to clip down the rest of the zipper this way, so it's a little bit easier to access now that we know approximately the right placement. So I'm going to just clip this all the way to the top. Then what we're gonna do is do a couple of test zips to make sure it is in fact in the exact right position, lining up both elements on either side. Okay, so now I'm going to do a little test zip to see if I'm in the right spot here. All right, so we're looking pretty good. I might make a small adjustment just around this area, but other than that, I would say I am decently happy with this. So I think what I'm gonna do is unzip, do a slight adjustment, and then we should be good to go. Great, now I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine so that I can sew this side down. Okay, so now that I have sewn down the other side, I'm going to do a test sit before I secure it a second time, just to make sure everything's lined up nicely in terms of the stripes, and so far it is, which is great. We like that. Okay, looking good. Yes. Perfect. So everything lined up perfectly, which I'm thrilled about. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pass by a second time just to secure that one more time, just to get that extra toughness we want so that nothing falls apart. Okay, so before I close up the zipper entirely, I'm going to attach my sleeves. So right now I have my lining sleeve and my outer sleeve that are not connected. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our jacket and we're going to turn the sleeves inside out. So I'm gonna grab this and flip it like so. And we're gonna take our lining, make sure it's all of our seams showing on both of these. So we can see the seam like this. And if we hold it up, we can see that both sleeves are in the middle together, touching. So I'm going to take these, and if you've done one of my other patterns, then you'll remember this trick. I like to say I connect the sleeves as if they're one long pipe. So I'm going to take this one and then connect it to the other side of the pipe. Now we're going to put the seams together. So this one and this one. And what we're going to do is we're just going to tuck and place them together like so. So we're going to fold up a little lip here like this. And I'm going to clip this down. So I'm going to take my clips and we're going to clip all the way around like so. Perfect, it's looking good. Also, make sure that your sleeves are not twisted at all. That is an easy mistake to make, but it should look like this, clipped all the way around. And what we can do is simply just sew along that edge. So I'm gonna take off this part of the sewing machine so that it's a little easier for me to get in there. But essentially I'm just gonna sew along that edge, and I'll probably pass by twice just to make sure it's super secure. Yeah, and then we can do the other one. All right, we've sewn this together. Now it's time to check if we've done this correctly. So I'm going to pull this sleeve back through. This looks good. So that's how it should look. Perfect. Now I'm going to secure it a second time and I will do the other sleeve after. So the last phase is basically attaching your lining to your zipper. So you want the lining to fold onto the zipper like this, and then we're going to hand stitch the lining to the zipper. So the first thing I do with this step, let me go down a bit. So the first thing I do with this step is I actually take it from the bottom and I fold it in. So we're going to take that and we're going to fold it in. Fold it in on the bottom, like so. Boom. So once it's like that, I'm going to start pinning, and then I'm going to tuck and fold, and then go all the way up like that. So I'll take my trusty llama pin holder, which I absolutely love. And I'm just gonna pin that in place. So I've pinned it in place just at the beginning actually. I think you can pin all the way in the beginning, but I think it might be even easier if you just start sewing. So I'm just gonna take a regular needle. This one's like a little bit of a bigger one. Then we're gonna take our matching thread to the zipper, same color as the lining, which is my preference. Now you're gonna wanna take like a good amount of thread. So thread the needle. I like to do about an arm's length. Then we cut. Then what we're gonna do is, hopefully you can see, tie a knot at the end with just like around this much left. Got a knot here. Now I'm gonna double knot and try to get it around the same spot. So we hold it, and then boom, got a nice double knot in the same spot, which is wonderful. Now I would say the trickiest part about this phase is not getting your string tangled. So always try to like straighten it out as you go. So we're just basically gonna go ahead and start. You can start from the outside of your jacket. I like to start just below the plastic part at the end of the zipper. Now let's see if I can kind of zoom in to what I'm doing here. Okay. On one side. Now, very important, what we're gonna do is, and this is the invisible stitch part, so we're going to go parallel to this crease right here, parallel to the crease, and we're gonna just take a little segment like that, pull it through. Now before you pull it through, put your finger in between, so in between the two sides, and make sure it doesn't get tangled. So I'm going to hold it like this. And we're going to pull it through. And do a little tug to tighten. Then what we're going to do is take this and go straight through the other side. Try to go as low as possible. Coming on to the other side and not getting, only getting on the zipper ribbon part. Pulling that through. Again, I'm going to make sure it doesn't get tangled. Sometimes it does pretty easily. But by putting my fingers there, it helps guide it. Tugging to make sure it's snug. And we're going to continue doing that all the way up. So coming through on the other side, like so. Like that. Again, parallel, right? Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Pull. We're gonna take it through to the other side again. Pull. And you see how this is creating a really clean, invisible stitch, or it's starting to. And I'm basically just gonna keep repeating this process till I'm all the way at the top of the jacket. I'm gonna remove my pin now. Take that. Straight through to the other side. Alright, and that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna keep going and finish both sides, and I'll join you back at the end to show you how it looks. So see you in a bit. Okay, now I have sewn the whole length of the zipper and I'm just finishing it off at the top, so I'm gonna pass through a couple of times on the same side to secure it. And I'm going to do a couple of loops and some knots to make sure that it's not going anywhere. This is it. We're finally done with the jacket. Super thrilled with it. I'll zip it up for you to show you how it looks. Zipped up. Da-da-da. looking great. This is how it looks in the back. Completely loving it. I'll just show you quickly how it looks on. Totally obsessed. I just want to also thank you for joining me on another tutorial. It's been an absolute blast leading you through this project, even though it's a little more difficult probably than some of the other projects that you may have tried. I'm so proud of you for attempting this, and feel free to comment below any questions that you have. I am right in there and I will answer any questions that you have along the way, any confusion. And don't forget to download the sewing pattern below and take the time to review it afterwards. Send me all of your final creations. And again, I look forward to seeing you in another video. So bye. Thank you so much.